Hi, welcome to my channel. This is Seams Easy and I'm Diane. Today I'm going to show you how to make fabric eggs and I'm going to give you the pattern for free. Just check the description to download the PDF pattern. To make one fabric egg, you're going to need to cut either an 8x8 piece of cotton fabric or one 10x5 inch piece of cotton fabric. You're going to need this pattern that I provide to you for free. Click the description and it's a PDF file. You may download that and print out as many of those as you want. I've already cut out one piece. Other items you're going to need are pins. If you have pinking shears, great. If you don't, I'll show you how to trim the seams with a regular scissors. You're going to need a needle and thread. You're going to need some chalk or some kind of marking. You're also going to need regular scissors and you're going to need some polyester fiber fill. Okay, if you're using an 8" by 8" square to start with, here's how you're going to fold it so that you can cut it. You're going to fold it in half with the right sides together. Fold it back again so that you have it folded into quarters. And you will put your pattern piece on in a diagonal like that. Now, if your fabric has a directional print, an obvious directional print, such as these hearts all going in one direction, you want to have your egg with all the pattern going in one direction, you're going to need to use a 5" by 10" and then you're going to fold it like this. You're going to fold from the outer edges to the middle and then either fold it back like that or this is how I've pressed it. So now you have 4 layers and you're going to place your pattern piece like this. Okay, I have my piece cut out. I'm going to remove the pins. Now this T is for top, the top of the egg. And we want to mark on the wrong side. I just use a piece of chalk and I just make a mark like this. Flip that over, make another mark. Now, you're going to divide this into 2 and keeping those same pieces together. And then we're going to mark these sides. Now, what I want to do now is we're going to set the sewing machine to sew a 1/4 inch seam, and we're going to sew one side of each of these sets of pieces. Just 1/4 inch along that arc. Now I'm going to use a different color thread. Normally for this fabric I would use white so that it wouldn't show, but so that you'll be able to see what I have sewn, I'm going to use a different color thread. Okay, I've sewn the first seam on each of these. Now we're going to trim this seam. We're going to trim it to half its original width, so down to about 1/8 inch. Now for the first one I'm going to use pinking shears. If you have pinking shears, use them. Be very careful not to cut that stitching line. All right, so that one's finished. Now, if you do not have pinking shears, this is the method you're going to use. You're going to snip this seam allowance about every 1/2 inch along the seam, about 3/4 of the way across. Do not cut that stitching line. All right, so I've got that snipped along there. Be sure to snip it first and then trim. And you're going to cut this seam allowance in half, just down to about 1/8 inch, so that there's no bulk on the inside of the egg. we're going to take one of these pieces and we're going to turn it right side out. Keep this chalk mark at the top as you're handling it and working with it. Okay, so that one's turned right side out. Now this one, we're not going to turn right side out. We're just going to open it, and then we're going to nest these two together. We're going to match up the tops, which is the chalk mark, match those seams together, and then start pinning it. You're going to pin it all the way around. I pin the top, and then I pin the bottom, and then I pin the sides. Okay, so we've got our two halves pinned together. And I used a red pin here because this is where we're going to stop, but we're going to start here. We're going to leave about 1¼ inch open on that side, which is the straightest part of the egg seam. Leave about 1¼ inch open. We're going to start here and back stitch, and then at 1/4 inch seam all the way around, and we're going to stop here and back stitch. All right, I have stitched it all the way around 1/4 inch, and I've left about 1¼ inch open on one side. Now I'm going to trim this seam. Now if you're using regular scissors, you just want to cut in about 3/4 of the way to the stitching and then trim it. Do that all the way around, only on the stitched area. Do not trim this little piece here. I'm going to go ahead and trim this with my pinking shears. Okay, now we're going to turn the egg right side out. Now, before I begin stuffing it, I like to make sure that these little seam allowances at the opening are folded under 1/4 inch. All right, here I have our egg shape, and I have pressed that little 1/4 inch seam allowance under. That will be helpful when it comes time to stitch this little opening closed by hand. Now we're ready to get some fiber fill and stuff the egg. So I usually get about enough to hold in my two hands, just squeeze it all together. That's going to be more than you really need, but you don't need more than that. So we're just going to stuff this egg as full as we can. Now, you want it just a little bit over full. All right, we've got our little egg nicely stuffed. We're ready to stitch that opening up, and you want to push down that fiber fill and close that opening so that there's no fiber fill sticking out. And here's what I do. I take a pin and I just kind of work the pin back and forth. And this is just going to hold it while we stitch it by hand. All right. Now I'm going to stitch this closed with a different color thread so that it's easy for you to see my stitches. Ordinarily, I would use some coordinated thread color. You're going to, from the opposite end of where you had that pin's head, we're going to come into the opening here and just go back and come up through the seam about 1/4 inch back or so. Now you've knotted this thread so it goes in and it holds there. Now you're going to come across to the other side of the seam, go under, and then come back up about a fourth of an inch or so, maybe a little less, and then pull it up. Now you're going to go on the other side of that seam, and you're going to go down into the fabric and then come back up, make a small stitch here. All right, this is called ladder stitch, L-A-D-D-E-R. So now we're going to come across here to this side and do the same thing again. And as you stitch, you can undo a little bit of that pin to give yourself some room to work. And you can make 2 or 3 stitches before you tighten it up. So you can see I've got my little ladder stitch, and then you can kind of just gently pull it to kind of snug those edges together. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the pin out, and we'll close the rest of this little opening. We're just gonna gently pull that. Now you can see this blue thread, but if I was using white thread, it would be hard to see it. Right. Now, I'm going to make one more cross stitch, come up right beside that seam, look and make sure this is snugly shut. Now we're going to do a knot. So you're going to lay the needle down against the fabric, wrap this thread around 2 times, and then just push the needle back in, and then it can come out pretty much anywhere because we're going to trim it off where it's coming out. Pull gently. There's your little knot. And like I said, if this was white thread, you wouldn't see that. And just cut that off. So now you can just kind of massage the egg to get it into the exact shape that looks right to you. And there we have it. All right, so here are the 2 finished eggs. This one is the one that I cut with the 8x8, and it was cut on the bias. You can see the hearts are kind of going in every direction, although it's not bad. It kind of looks pretty. Now the difference is this one was on the 10.5. You can see all the hearts are going in one direction. I don't recommend using a directional fabric cut on the straight of the grain, because as you can see, when you cut it on the bias, it takes a better egg shape. Now this one works, but it's just not as nicely shaped as the one that was cut on the bias. And so if you use fabrics that don't have an obvious direction, then go ahead and use the 8x8 inch method.